T minus 1 minute. T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Today, our teacher taught us about a place called Africa. She say our mamas come from Queens over there. That means that we, royalty.
I don't need you to love me.
Afternoon, I needs me a wife.
Even if we have to part, you and me, us have one heart.
I don't need
Get off my land!
you
I rat you every day.
to love.
Nothing but death can keep me from it.
Oh, Miss Celie!
You must ain't got no kinfolk round these parts.
All I had was my sister. She was the only one ever loved me. I'm gonna hold my head up. I'm gonna put my shoulders back.
It's time for you to see the world.
There's gonna be some changes made.
Put it on.
This ain't me.
Hush. We need to look like we belong. Let's see this smile and color. Sweet and loving God.
Showing my heart to the folks that are close to you.
Now we're talking.
Hey, hi.
Dear Celie, we are more than just kings and queens. We are at the center of the universe.
Oh, yes, I.
Hey everyone, and welcome to For the Culture. I am your moderator, Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist and a member of Hosey Chapel C.M.E. Church. So welcome, welcome, welcome. The Methodist Church, the theme for African American History Month is African Americans and the Arts. And so we thought it fitting to start this season of what we hope to be the culture ongoing to discuss this movie, the bold new take on The Color Purple. So I am very excited to be able to have for you tonight a live discussion where you get to join in with your comments and your questions. Make sure that you drop them and we will be attending to them. I have a great moderating panel for you, and I am so excited to introduce them. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you Miss Lanita Pless King, who is the CEO of Royalty Love Creations Incorporated, founder of the nonprofit Theater Plus Corporation, ministry leader, actress, singer, songwriter, playwright, director, producer, graphic designer, and content creator. Next up, we have Miss Sierra Thompson, who is president of the Young Adult Ministry at Hosey C.M.E. Church and the co-director of the Christian Education in the West Georgia region of the 6th Episcopal District. And of course, we had to have a brother for you, Mr. Lewis York, who is the NCC mental behavioral health therapist at Transformation Counseling Center in Columbus, Georgia, and a member of several organizations that support youth and veterans. Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
Hey.
Hey, y'all.
Hi.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining. You all know I can be very persuasive. And so everybody was absolutely excited about joining us today. I won't belabor the point. Just want to remind everybody to drop your questions and comments, but let's go ahead and get into it. Now, this bold new take on this beloved classic has gotten a lot of press. Some of it has been very positive, and some of it has been kind of negative. And so we're going to talk today about different themes. And I want to make sure that we get into some of the things that I think are most important aspects of this. And so let's start with the family relationships. Now, we know that our families of origins affect us in our development and our growth and how we show up in relationships throughout our lives. So let's talk about some of the relationship dynamics. We'll start with the women. Let's start talking about some of those relationship dynamics that you saw from women in the movie. What are some themes that you saw between the female characters, and how do you think that shaped them as they progress throughout the movie?
Well, I'm going to jump up in there.
Jump on in there.
I'm going to jump in there. So don't beat me up.
I'm not. I told you. Nothing but love. Nothing but love.
But I'm going to use these two words. And I went over it with my fiance. These two words, weaker and stronger. And when I say these two words, I'm talking about there's a transformation. So there's a continuum throughout the movie that you see. In the beginning part, you saw the weakness of Celie. You saw her weakness in as far as intellectual and emotionally. And we can go into different facets of why she was weak. It was colorism in there and a bunch of other things in there. And then you saw her sister Nettie. You saw the strength of her. She had a intellectual strength because she was teaching Celie, how to read and write. But also emotionally, when she had to leave, she was telling her, you be strong, you keep fighting. But as the movie progresses, you start seeing the metamorphosis or the transformation of Celie coming about through the different experiences that she had. So that's how I looked at it. I looked at the weaker and the stronger part of that.
Oh, I like that, Brother York. So what you're saying is, when somebody loves you and they invest in you, when you may have areas that are underdeveloped, this allows you to be able to grow into who you are. So that we all need that strong family base, or at least somebody who can be family to us, to pour into us. I like that. I like that. Lanita, I feel like you got something in your spirit. What you got for me? What you got for me?
Well, it's very ironic that he used the two words, because I also have two words that I always reference. This is from trauma to triumph.
Ooh.
It starts off basically showing all of the trauma that is based in this one household. And you are absolutely correct, because the main character, as being Celie, experiences the main trauma. And she has a sister that is treated differently because of her color and because of her intellect. And then there is other strong women in her life as she get older, as she progresses, to show her that she's more than just what she believes that she is, which is nothing. You see Suge Avery come in with all this confidence, and she don't know nothing about confidence. So that was all a lesson for her. And then, of course, everybody know Miss
Sophia.
Miss Sophia.
Yes.
She don't take no mess from nobody. And she needed that visual of strength in women, because during that time, it was around the 1900s. During that time, it was coming right out of slavery. So these are the descendants of the enslaved, and they were oppressed by the white people. So when they became back to the family, the men started to oppress the women, and because that's all they knew at that time. So to show themselves strength, they would somewhat abuse the women. So with women coming together and showing strength and coming together and being a family, a one unit, she was able to go from her trauma, which was a lesson, all the way to her triumph.
So we have from weaker to stronger, triumph to trauma to triumph. And so I'm hearing everybody say growth. Right. So from wherever you started, and come on, Saints, wherever you have started from, you don't have to stay there. There is yet hope on the other side for you that you can be poured into and be able to see past what you have known to be what you are purposed to be. Come on, what you got for me, Sierra?
Well, I want to really what my sister just said. I want to highlight that. So there were so many women around her that had everything that she wanted. So she had Sophia, who was strong. She had Shug Avery, who was sassy and jazzy, and then even her sister, as strong and powerful as she was, who went off to, be strong for herself. And so she also had, even though she had all those women around her, and speaking on that, the trial part, she had to find it within herself. So no matter what they told her, or you're pretty, or you can do this, or stay strong and fight and all that, she still didn't see that. She still had, so she did have all those women around her, but she had to find it within herself to be strong and have admiration and self-love. All that she had to find it for herself.
Thank you so much for that, because I think like a lot of times we don't know what's in us, but other people come on
see
now,
it.
we'll see what is in us. And all of you have said, here we have several women in different places. All of them have a common unifying thread, which is they've been through. And I know people say, I didn't want to see another trauma movie. And I think that sometimes people get so stuck in the trauma, they don't see the triumph. People get so stuck in the trials, they don't see that on the other side of the trials is when I trailblaze. They don't get to see that I started out being someone who did not have the ability to have phonetic development. I couldn't read. Then I got to a point where I was a business owner. I was a woman who was known by Squeak, but at the end of it, I was known by Mary Agnes. When we see Black women, and as you're so right, Lanita, I'm glad you brought this up about this era of time where women could not have things unless a man signed for them to have things. You were represented by a male owning you and taking responsibility for you. And so we do have, and I'm glad you brought this up, Lanita, and we'll slide right on the end of that, is the roles of men in trying to protect the women in the ways that they knew how. And trying to be able to connect to women in the ways that they knew how. And these were opportunities for them in their own growth, as we see. So come on, talk to me, Brother York, about how men were presented, right? Because a lot of brothers, and I know you all heard this, a lot of brothers say, I do not want to go and see this bold new take on the beloved classic because it still is going to spin men in this negative light. And I don't want to get beat up. So talk to us, Brother York. What you got?
Yeah, they be like, bruh, we already beat up enough. But looking at it from a perspective of therapists and just looking at it from my own perspective of my own development, I looked at it from the fatherhood. I looked at Albert, Mr. And his father. And it was funny because he only had the capacity to give Harpo what he was given.
My Lord.
There was something I wrote down, and he said something about I've given. Where did I write it down at? I've given you pretty much like I've given you. Didn't I give you enough, boy, to become a man? But the thing is, he didn't give him anything to become a man. He gave him only what he was given. So there was a strange dynamic, and in that, even Albert was panning after his own father for his respect, for his love, for his approval, and couldn't gain it. So I saw that in there. At the same time, I'm the protector. I go off of this template of how a man is supposed to be, but I have no idea what that's supposed to look like, because again, post-slavery. And so I only know it from the perspective of the slave master's hand. I really don't know it from the perspective of my own culture, my own color, because it was stripped away. We were emasculated. So I'm trying to put these things together, and I'm doing the best I know how. It's so funny. I see him yelling at Celie and treating her like she's below human, but then he goes to the mailman. The mailman calls him by his name, but he says, yes, sir, to the mailman. So is how he can switch that quick from, you know, and there's two words that I looked at in here: subservient versus submissive.
Ooh.
I know that's going to come up later when we talk about the women, but even in this aspect, subservient versus submissive, and I think this is where it gets twisted. So that was funny. Then Alfonso, Celie and Nettie's stepfather, the role of I don't know if we're gonna go there yet. If the
go there.
Okay, the abuse there. And I think a lot of times as men, we don't want to see that. Just to be honest, we don't want to see that. But you know, the saying goes that we don't look at what happened in the past, then we're going to repeat it again. And so that dynamic of abuse, of abusing those girls because that's what they thought was right. You know, I have to have these babies, and based on your, you know, if you're dark, if you're light, and all these other things, but they were introducing trauma. So it's trauma producing trauma in that. So that was another aspect in there that I think needed to be seen by men, if no one else. And those
all right, Brother York, already you gave me 15 points. Hold on. You get I got let the people digest. Let the people digest, Brother York. We got plenty of time. We're gonna come back and get those other points. But you mentioned so many good things, and I do not want those to pass our audience members by. And again, audience, please make sure you drop questions, comments in the chat. So I heard you say a few different things. One is when you're talking about the elder Mr. Johnson, and you see how the elder Mr. Johnson talks to Albert, right? So you talked about that relationship of this is what was modeled from the elder Mr. Johnson to Albert, who passed it down to Harpo.
Right.
And you see that there is very much a demeaning tone in which they talk to each other. I am your superior and you are my subservient. You mentioned that dynamic as well. And then you went over and you talked about Alfonso, which is Celie's stepfather, who fathered her 2 children. Now, of course, we know that the little backstory behind that is Albert's wife was actually murdered because she was having an affair with another man. And we know that Celie's actual father was murdered. And so you're talking about men who are coming into trauma from men who passed down trauma, is what you were getting into. And so that's all they knew to pass down. And as you said, they felt so powerless in all these other aspects of their life that the place that they were able to have power was in their relationships, and particularly as patriarchs of their families. And so because I feel powerless in this environment, then I tend to overpower in another environment. And Lanita, it looked like you had something in your spirit you wanted to add to that thing. I saw you nodding and shaking.
You actually said it. You just said it right there. It's the aspect of leaving home and going home. So you leave one environment to create that same environment to bring down it. So you have to, when you see this movie, read the book, see the stage play, all of it. It seems to miss the people seem to miss the story of redemption for the men because it starts out with their trauma. The only reason someone treats someone like that is because how they were treated. That's you have to break the generational curse. And you see the generational curse being broken in 2 different ways. One with the preacher, with Sugar Avery's daddy, because it's this certain stigma that you have to have in the church that you can't represent me this way. I'm gonna disown you. He came back around with a story of redemption. And then even though old Mr. didn't get his redemption, young Mr. got his redemption and was able to teach Harpo, now this is how you treat your wife. Now this is how you treat your woman. And the symbolism of not trying to get away from the men, but the symbolism with that redemption story for him, it was able to allow Celie to put on pants.
Come on now.
There's a lot of symbolic in wearing pants because I wear the pants. I bring the, all that good stuff because that's a dominant role. But for her to find her identity, those pants were very symbolic.
Come on, gender identity challenging. Come on here. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'm here for it. I'm here for it
Yeah.
because we're gonna circle back to that. So we're gonna put a pin in the challenging of gender identity and norms in families that we saw throughout the movie. Sierra, what you got for me?
So I want to bring up, someone mentioned trauma producing trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the the dad, or Celie's now husband, you
Mm-hmm.
know, he only treated her the way that he was taught, like we keep saying.
Mm-hmm.
He only treated her that way because that's how his dad talked to him.
Mm-hmm.
So there was abuse right there as well. So that's all that he knew how to treat her. But Celie's stepson, you know, his love was kind of different to Sophia. Like he
Mm-hmm.
wanted to love her, but he was
Mm-hmm.
much softer than, he
Yeah.
had a softer side to him than
Mm-hmm.
her. So his love was kind of different. So even though that was his son, you know, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's a part where he saw him hit her, or he saw her talk to him a certain kind of way, and he didn't treat Sophia like that. As
Mm-hmm.
strong as she was, but he didn't. I noticed. I hope we circle back around
We're
talking
gonna
Yeah.
about
circle
love
back.
now. But yeah, so yeah, that
Yeah.
definitely, I did notice the difference. In, even though his dad was like that to Celie, his relationship with Sophia, it wasn't like that. He definitely was much softer with her.
Can I
Absolutely.
can I throw that in there, Dr.
Come on, throw it in there, brother York. What
She
you got?
went, she went there. That and I'm only gonna say it like this. You saw, even though it was generation after generation,
Mm-hmm.
but with Harpo, you heard the struggle in him. When he
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
went in that knot on his head,
Mm-hmm.
he said, "But I love her." So you heard him crying out, "There's
Mm-hmm.
a struggle in me to be something better,
To
but
be
all I
something
know
better.
is this." And I'm gonna leave
Mm-hmm.
it there. I'm gonna leave it
Yeah.
right.
No, that is a good place to go as we talk about loving relationships and how love can overpower the trauma patterns. When
Yeah.
you have loving relationships, when you care about someone and you're able to recognize that what you have seen modeled for you as love is not the only way to love people, and that love has much more depth than that. And that's what we see Harpo struggling with. That's an excellent point. But we also see with Pastor Avery, Suge's father, because the reason Pastor Avery disowned Suge is because she ended up having 3 children with Albert out of wedlock. And you hear some references to that in the first one, not in the remake, about all these babies you setting the population of the county a new high, is what Elder Johnson says. But part of the reason why it is difficult for these men to love in a different capacity is because they have this very narrow perspective of what love looks like. But you absolutely do see the men being able to challenge what they've been taught about love. And part of what allows them to do that is faith. And so let's talk a little bit about that. Spirituality, we see fatherhood, we see spirituality, we see identity shifting in these men. And then we'll circle back and talk about how it shifts in women in various ways too. But talk to us about how we're seeing shifts in this men, the redemption piece, the reconciliation piece, and even recovery, because abuse can sometimes be like an addiction. And so we end up feeling our endorphins kick up and feeling this sense of power when we're abusive to other people. It gives us a sense of identity, as if we matter, that our worth is dictated by how people fear us. But we see that shift, that is not how I want people to love me, through fear, that I want people to love me because of how I treat them. So let's talk a little bit about that.
I think we hit on a few of them. Mister, he was broken at that point. In the new remake, you see him finally hitting rock bottom, finally hitting nothingness to where he was broken, and calling out for redemption, calling out for deliverance, so to speak. If you look at it like that, because when you looked at him in the church before, he's sleeping, he's nonchalant about it, but now he's at a point where now he has to face his maker, and he's calling out, he's crying out. The contrast to his father never changes. His father seems to be stuck. He's stuck in that time and refuses to leave. And we can assume anything. I like to think it was out of fear, that he did not want to see anything better than the way he knew. And with Harpo, I think his was already happening. And it's funny here, and I'm gonna leave it here. I always tell people, when we look at the sons and the fathers, and even with mothers and daughters, we'll say, you're going to need me before I need you. But I see something different, I guess, after being a parent myself, that the father needs the son in order to become better. And the same thing with the daughter and the mother. And here, I think by Mr. Albert looking and seeing how Harpo is, that's a part of you. He could not witness that and not change. So I think that was an impact on them changing. And then Buster and Grady, I was looking at their perspective, because there was some, Buster was kind of big and Sophia's big, and all those dynamics in it. But those are the two out of the three that I saw that or three out of the four that changed. The pastor, Mr. and Harpo. They sat at the table at the end because they made a decision.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Buster, because he was also an example of a loving man who did not fit the character that he looked like, right? So you see this big, strong man who is gentle and loving and kind, and allowed Sophia to be able to have her space and her identity without feeling threatened by that. I want to shout out everybody in the comments. I'm seeing you all come through. Chris Davis, Mel Odie in there, Burnett Thomas in there, Linda Hunt is in there. Thank you all so much for coming, for showing up, for commenting. Please let us know, Chris Davis, let us know if you have any questions or any comments that you want to add. But they are saying you all are spot on. What you got for me, Lanita?
To touch on, it's hard to just stay on the men when it deals with the spiritual, because throughout the theme of the entire storyline, it's basically God stripping you down to nothing, to the point of it's me and you. When you lose everything, when you're at your rock bottom, there is no other way than to look up.
My Lord.
And that's with the theme of every single person who had to find God in it. Celia lost the only person she ever had, she ever loved, whoever loved her sister. Mr. lost the woman he loved, all his property, everybody left him. Rock bottom. God, if you change me, I'm gonna do right. Same thing with Sophia. She was loud and boisterous and disobedient, doing what she want to do, until she got humbled down, sitting in that jail. And because God showed himself through Celia, I know there's a God. So it comes down to being isolated, to not having people, places, and things, so that you can finally hear the voice of God. So I know people talk about the trauma, don't want to see another trauma movie, but I identify with that. This is why this is my favorite movie. This is why I wanted to carry on the message in it, because it's identifiable. Everybody done been through something. And when you get down to that lowest point, there's nobody left but God. And you can't do nothing but get up after that.
Amen. You want us to go ahead and open the doors of the church now? Or
I was trying to preach, y'all, but that's the part that is so passionate for me. I completely identify with all of it. I was Celia. I absolutely.
My Lord. My Lord. And what you said is so powerful about when you get to a point where you know it's no one but God. Because pride, right? We haven't gotten to the pride piece. But pride is what also kept people in the place of hurting each other. Right? Needing to prove things, needing to prove worth. I saw worth in the comments. Right? So people weren't able to see their worth in any other way than to do things to other people to get to that worth. And so when they got to a point where all of that was stripped away, when I don't have anything, when I have to really sit with myself, that is when God spoke to them, and they knew that this couldn't be anybody but God, because I know I couldn't have pulled myself out when Harpo told his dad to go home. He was so drunken. And you could see the embarrassment and the shame and the pity on Harpo's face as he's looking at his father embarrassing himself. He has to take his dad out like, Dad, go home. in that moment, I think that is when Albert had to see himself. He saw himself through his son's eyes, and that was a very humbling moment for him because he realized that everything that I thought that made me has been stripped away.
Right.
And so now I got to deal with myself. Come on, Saints. What you got for me, Sierra?
I feel like my sister is really on my piece of paper and reading all my stuff off here. You know, but no, but to her, but to her point, now I may get fussed at in the comments about this, but when I was reading this question, the only person I thought about was Mr. Because and like she said, you know, he was on top, he had the land, he had, you know, somebody to take care of them kids and clean up that house, you know, he had he had his lady to come in town to entertain him, he was on top of the world. And then when everything got taken away from him, and the woman that was there, you know, taking care of them kids, that house became nasty, them kids became running ragged, but she's gone on, she opened up her shop, she's doing all these things, and you have nothing. He even took the very last thing that he had, which was his land, to sell it, to buy that that was the last thing that he had to himself. And he sold that because he knew, like she said, I feel like God was telling him that if you don't do this, you're gonna be a little bit worse than what you are right now. And so, you know, everything was happening to him, but I feel like, and I'm sure y'all will agree, God's hand is much more heavier than some of the things that he was going through. So I felt like, and like I said, this question, the only person I thought about was Albert in this, was Celia's husband in this.
Okay.
And when I tell you it's a difference between being in the pig pen and feeding the pigs,
Yep.
when you down there in that pig pen with them, the view is a little different.
Yeah.
And I think all of us have had a pig pen moment where we sitting in the mess that we created, and we're asking ourselves, how did I get here? And when you have to recognize I got here because of my choices, how I treated people, what I prioritized, what I have gotten away from, what I've lost sight of, then you know the only way to get back to that anchor is through God. So let us circle back, right? Because of course we cannot, as you said, Lenita, not address the women in their transformation spiritually as well, because we see a spiritual awakening in the women too. We see them challenge gender identity, and all of these women, out of their hurt, were doing things to try to have worth. They were trying to create an identity because they didn't feel like they had one. So let's talk about, for the women, identity in this growth, their spiritual awakening, them being able to see their worth and value, and how that changed for them as this movie progressed.
Well, I can say specifically for C.M.E, when you are traumatized early in age by men, then you look at men in a light of, these are my abusers, these are my accusers, these are my prosecutors, and I don't trust you. So when you get women in your life that show you compassion and show you love, it confuses, especially a young woman, confuses the way that God has ordained families. It's supposed to be God, man, woman, children. But when that is distorted, then it distorts the love that is that is natural for all humans. I can say that there is a blessing in the rejection. It's hard to see, but when you look at everything, what her children was taken from her, Felix. All of her children was taken from her, and that was a good thing because they didn't need to be subject to that trauma that she was still in. Her sister were taken from her, which was needed because she was able to cultivate her sister's children later in life, in a whole nother culture. So spiritually, you can be so low, but when you finally get to the point where you see what God was doing, the progression of rejection to this blessing, he had a plan the whole time.
My God. I appreciate you saying that sometimes it is in the most painful moments that we're able to see that love is possible. And we'll spin the block on this as well. Examples of what loving relationships look like, because I think that got challenged in this movie as well. I think sometimes in our mind we have that love can only come in one form, and if I don't get it in that form, it's not possible for me. And I think one of the things that this movie does is it allows us to see that love is possible in a lot of different ways. And in that truly being loved by people, it sets us free from that pain of feeling like there's only pain that comes through love. So I think for me, people talk about the pain and the trauma of this movie, but I always see the love in this movie. And I see loving relationships between these women. I see loving relationships between men in this movie. I see loving relationships between men and women in this movie. See loving relationships between children in this movie. And I think that it is important for us to remember that the greatest of these is love. What you got for me, Brother York?
I've been reading a book on forgiveness, and this sinks into it. And sometimes we want the peace of God and we want the joy of God, but it comes through the crushing. It comes through the
yes.
And so these things, like you said, Lanita, these things had to happen. In the beginning, Celie was taught, so to speak, that I'm giving your children to God. And so she questions, why don't God give them back? But on her journey, trauma after trauma, abuse after abuse, we see that now she has to now find God herself through all of that. Now there's nobody teaching her and lying to her about God. She's finding God herself. And God is allowing things to unravel before. He already had a plan. And I think sometimes when and I'm going to speak for the men, some men, when we look at it, it's only a trauma movie, then that means possibly we're stuck in a trauma and we can't see the triumph, like you said earlier, in the movie. You talked about identities. Well, who really had an identity in the movie? We're in post-slavery. So we're trying to figure who we are out. And in the beginning, Celie and Nettie, they're talking about, they say we come from Queens. But they don't know if they do or don't. So we're trying to figure it all out. Are we Queens? Are we this? Are we subservient? Are we? And so they're trying to figure all these identities out, and the men are too. And so this whole movie is all about transforming, the transformation, not just physically, mentally, and emotionally, but definitely spiritually. Yes. We see that throughout this movie, and it's beautiful.
That transformation piece, yes, that transformation piece is so really, really powerful, because we do see people being transformed, and we see people being transformed through the love of God. We see people being transformed through hitting the bottom and knowing nothing but God. We see people transform after they have gone through things that they thought were going to kill them. And you even hear that language. Miss Sophia says, I thought I wasn't gonna make it. When I was in there, knowing that I was at the mercy of these people in this jail, and that they could do whatever they wanted, and there was nothing that I could do about it. And I was stripped all of the power that I had been able to use. My voice, it was gone.
But you said the love. You said,
the
when you
love.
talk about that love, the different type of love.
Absolutely.
That love came there every day.
Came to visit her, came to see her, and you hear Miss Sophia say, "You came to see me." And you see it in her eyes, the hopelessness, right? And this is how love overcomes hopelessness. You see this love from somebody who, even in your weakest moments, because we have been taught that when we don't look good, we're not worthy to anybody anymore. They don't need us. They discard us. We're no longer worthy of love. That's how some of us feel about our relationship with God. Well, God, I'm nothing. Why would you want to love me? And so we see in here, Celie never gave up. She never gave up on Miss Sophia. She always came to see her. And it was that love that allowed her to be able, when she was released, to know that she had people that were going to be there for us. How many of us know that it's somebody that loves us if nobody else does? Come on, Saints. What you got for Miss Sierra?
Even though Celie was going through everything that she was going through at home, for her to even still have compassion for somebody else to go and see about them, that's another thing too about the movie, that she showed compassion, because she could have walked out. I mean, she may have not have could have walked out the front door and left her husband, but I don't know. To me, that was a selfless act. with her going to go and seeing Sophia. Even though she going through all this and what she's going through, she still showed compassion. She still, you know, every single day she went. Even now, Sophia never gave her a response, but she was there, and Sophia recognized that, like you said, you came to see me. And so in that, with that question, our minds going to the next one about love, but
Come on.
I know we've got to tickle and
No,
toggle
go
that,
ahead. Go
but
ahead.
I want to circle back what my sister said about how the dynamics of the relationships, because Sophia Seeley didn't have wasn't taught about love. She wasn't taught that she was pretty. She wasn't taught that she was worth anything. But when Suge came along and put that lipstick on her, she still didn't see it then, but she started to find herself, and it took the love of a woman. It took the love and compassion of a woman to show, like, no, look at this mirror. You can be pretty. You can be this. So I did recognize that relationship. I didn't see it. I know in the musical, maybe not, but I didn't see that sexually. But I definitely saw her just showing her, giving her the example of what love can look, that you can be loved because you are beautiful. And it did take a woman to show her that. I noticed that as well.
I think that's a powerful moment. I see you want to say something, Lanita. Go ahead.
I just want to interject as well when she was talking about the relationship from Celie and Sophia. That's a lesson of redemption as well, because initially she told Hoppo to beat her.
Correct.
That's all she knew. So with her being in an adversary situation, I need to come see about you, because at first I wanted you to be like me. But now you're in a subsidiary situation, and now I need to see about you. And a lot of times, people who deal with trauma, it can go two different ways. You can become what you were, or you can do the opposite of what it was. And she wanted to show the love that someone never showed her. She wanted to be there when no one else was there for her. So that is something that is very detrimental in this storyline as well. I just want to point that out.
Come on, let's talk about retribution, because I definitely think that for a lot of us, we feel like if I have wronged you, then that's the end of the story. But when I tell you, this is the one good thing about God, because forgiveness.
Yes.
Right? Like it doesn't matter how many times you mess up. It doesn't matter how many times you misspoke, you hurt someone, you use your words, you use your fish, you use your voice to hurt people. Don't think that you can't come back from that. Don't think that God can't deliver you from that. And don't think that you can't come back. And now in all cases, people may say, hey, I forgive you, but I don't want to fool with you. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't still be healed from that. And so we saw Celie be healed from continuing to pass on what she was taught, and she was able to love on another woman in a way that was actually loving. I'm not going to love you in the way that I've been taught to be loved, which is to control you, because that's what we saw in that movie early on, that love was control. But we're seeing our sisters be set free as they're learning that love is not about control. Love is about seeing you person and being present with you and showing up for you and loving you and supporting you and encouraging you. And this is as we see all of the women gather at Suge's house. We see Squeak, we see Suge, we see Celie, who are growing in that, being supportive women in a loving environment with each other, being able to share with each other and grow. And there wasn't a hierarchy. There wasn't a power dynamic. It was a love and appreciation environment where we all have these gifts. We all have things we bring. And more importantly, we're all deserving of love. What you got, Brother York?
And I want to bring Buster and Grady back in.
Come on.
I remember Buster says something, it's not about me. I think I'm probably not using the right words, about me controlling Sophia, but bringing her where she wants to go. I'm probably saying it wrong.
Paraphrasing, but we got you.
Okay. So, and that's how he thought about it. Then when we look at Grady sitting at the table, those two men were loving. They didn't challenge their wives. They heard them. They were, and at this time, and I probably, a lot of guys probably looking at me crazy, but at this point in time, this is when they needed to be heard, because nobody was hearing the woman. At this time, we got to look at too. At the times, white women were already being subservient. So the black woman was below even all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was a crucial time for women everywhere. And so for these black men to be able to hear their women, to be able to listen to them and hear them and to undergird them in their professions and traveling, whatever it was, that was powerful. To the point where you see at the end, now you'll see Mr. learning a little bit more about, oh, this is how it should look.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think that was powerful by itself right there. I just wanted to bring those two back on.
Absolutely. But I think that's important because that you also saw brotherly love between
Mm-hmm.
these men when they were gathered together.
Yeah.
You see that camaraderie among men. You see them being able to love on each other, where
Mm-hmm.
they're not one has to be the person who has the superior power. We can all exist together. We're not in competition. So
Right.
you saw that, and yeah, these are characters that weren't necessarily main characters, but if
Mm-hmm.
you pay attention to how they're interwoven into the lines, you see that, and you begin to see that love now spread, which goes to show that even if you feel like you are in the minority in how you love on people and treat them, don't stop doing that. Because do know that one thing about love is that's the one time in life where it is good to be contagious. Love is an awesome example of something that is contagious and it allows things to grow and bloom. And so we want to stand on. Come on, what you say now, Lanita?
One more insert with what he just said.
Yes, ma'am.
If you take a look at the women, those two women, Sophia and Suge, they exude confidence. And you gain respect when you respect yourself. So that's another lesson that you have for these women. The women that are submissive and quiet and don't know the identity, men will not respect you. But those who have that identity and know themselves, just like they respected the white man, they was respectful to them. So it's just a matter of confidence.
Come on, know your worth. I'm seeing people in here talking about trust and how important trust is. And I think that it is important for us to understand. So as we shift, we have about 15 minutes to our guest, and so we want to make sure that you drop those questions, you drop those comments in there, keep it going. I want to make sure that one, you all know that this won't be the last time we have a For the Culture conversation. And so it's important for you to go ahead and email those topics so that, and we'll get that drop. There it is, hoseychapelmedia@gmail.com. So when you want to hear something else, you want this conversation to keep going, then you drop those topics, and we're going to do our best to try to get to a point where monthly we're having a For the Culture. So you will be the first. So you go ahead, and this is when your voice will be heard. So I know y'all say, oh, they'll get a lot of comments and questions. I'm not going to drop anything. That is not true. So please make sure you take an opportunity to drop some topics that you want us to hear as we transition to this last 15 minutes. Because I know that we cannot end this conversation without going here. Y'all have already alluded to it. When we talk about the church and we talk about sexual orientation and identity, I think we would be remiss if we did not address that, because we see loving relationships. They're alluded to, they're a little bit subtle in here, but we see loving relationships. And I think what we also see is people being rejected for the types of relationships they have. And one of the comments that I hear frequently from people is they don't feel like church is a safe space for them, so they leave the church. They don't feel like they've received messages that they are loved by God. So let's talk a little bit about how people get disconnected from the church, judgment, sexual orientation, how they show up in this movie, but also how they are relevant to how people feel about their maybe own faith experiences. Talk to me. Who's up first?
I want to bring up somebody that we haven't talked about. I can't remember her name, but the church woman, Miss Mann.
Okay.
So she played Doris.
Right. Yeah. And I watched her, and she. We know that the church pushes people out, but you can watch her demeanor when Suge came in. You can watch her demeanor as she looked at different people that were, especially women that were not fitting the part in church. And it reminds me of stories I used to hear in the past. Young girl, 16, pregnant, they put out the church. Well, where's she gonna go? And now in this age, when we're talking about sexuality, where else they're going to go but in the church to understand the love of God? We can't, it's not about us breaking anything. It's about God doing what he does best. And that's loving.
Come on, love.
Right. And so I looked at that part that she wasn't where the father now embraced his daughter. She still, I never saw her embrace her.
Yeah.
I never saw her do any of that. And so that was still a stuck point for her. Reminds me of Mr.'s dad, still stuck in the ways.
Mm-hmm. That's a good word right there, because sometimes people will get stuck. And I frequently talk to people about, you want to be right or you want to have a relationship. And we see for Pastor Avery, he wanted to have a relationship with his daughter. And he recognized it was so powerful what you said about God is love. Because a lot of times we will use God to make points. We will use God as if God is over here for us to beat down on people and not actually talk about the love of God, and how God wants us to have loving relationships. So I appreciate you saying that. And I also appreciate you saying that sometimes folks won't be able to do that because they're stuck in the place they're stuck in. But that does not mean that you, one, don't deserve love. And it also does not mean that God does not love you. And it does not mean that you can't have loving relationships just because a person or people may be stuck. It doesn't mean that it's not possible for you to have those loving relationships. All right, what you got for me, Lanita?
It was an honor to be a part of the musical stage play of it all. And I feel the role of Church Lady Doris.
All right.
One of my main lines was, I heard about Po Child Ceiling. I was a gossiping one that I always heard about what's going on, but I'm never doing anything about it. We can sit around and talk about all the things that, oh, that don't look right, and oh, this is, but nobody. The church house is for the sick, and all of us are wrapped up in this sick skin right here, this flesh, and we're all going to the doctor. God is the doctor, but we so quick to judge as if we are the God, and not allowing, because his word will go forth and do what it needs to do. We have no control over any of that. So we are to show the love of Christ to every single body, whatever they choose to do in their life. Our job is to show his love through our actions and our words, so that his word can do what it needs to do for whatever the person. So whatever sexual orientation, whatever sin that easily besets you, that is not our job to try to correct. It is God's job only, and it's our job to carry on his message. Not trying to preach.
Oh, you did it already.
She's trying to get that collection plate off her. Go ahead, Sierra.
You know, I'm so passionate about this question. I'm so passionate about this question because I truly have a passion for young people in the church. And so Suge, you know, her personality was so big, you know, and so she did get the side eye, like Brother York said. But and to my sister's point, you know, when we come to church, first of all, we have a hard time, or we get in the habit of saying what we think church is. And you know what I'm saying? So other people have their own perception of what church is, but at the end of the day, it's not about the church, is about my relationship and where I'm trying to go. And so we saw Suge coming in trying to mend that relationship in church with her dad, into his point, still getting the side eye, never was embraced. And a lot of times the rejection comes from, we have it in our mind that we won't be embraced. I can't come to church with my being 15 with a daughter. You know, I can't come to church with my children and not a ring on my hand and not a man, you know. So we already have it in our mind because it's painted, the picture is already painted, and we're prejudged, you know what I'm saying? But and then also to the point, we don't even know, and this may be, I don't know if I need to talk to Tyler, Oprah, who's a never to get this out there, but to her point, when she said that lady was known as like the gossiper, she knew all the tea, you know, a lot of times young people, we don't come because you all don't tell your story. We don't tell you. Everybody has a story. You know, a lot of older people in the church was raised by grandmothers and aunties because their mother and their father was not there. You know, we don't talk about the gossiper's story. And
Mm.
so I find that interesting as well, that that's a piece that, like I said, I don't know if I need to, talk to Tyler, Oprah. But let me not say too much, because I don't want my idea to be put out there.
Don't give them
You
too
know what
much,
I
sis.
mean?
Don't
Let me
give them too
not
much.
I already wrote it down.
Yeah.
Brother York will
I
have
hate
a book
for
published next year.
I hate for Oprah or somebody to steal what my idea or whatever. But just don't forget about me down here in Phoenix City, Alabama.
Every perspective needs to be told, because
Every perspective need to be told.
Story. You're right. Everybody
Absolutely.
has a story of trauma,
Everybody has a story.
triumph.
Look, the comment section blew up. Like, you better say that, amen. And I do think it's important for us to recognize that we all you all got your backgrounds up, different things you're wearing, right? All of us are a brand. Our churches are too. And so we have to ask the question, if someone were to look at our church homes, and what does that brand represent? Do I want my brand to be that only certain people can come in here when they're in certain places in their lives doing certain things? And as Minister Robinson said on here, all you have to do is look out in the field of purple, and you will see all of God's wonderful love and creation. And if God has that capacity for love, and I do encourage everyone on here to remember that God does not have a limited capacity to love. And God's love does not come with terms and conditions, much like y'all sign that stuff and ain't read it. God's love is unconditional. And so we put terms and conditions on God's love, but God has never put terms and conditions on how God loves us. That love is infinite. It will never run out, and there's always capacity for more. I want to say thank you to all of my guests this afternoon, this evening, for coming on. We want to say thank you for joining us. To our panelists, Sierra Thompson, Lanita Pless King, Lewis York. We appreciate your insights, your sharing. You are the inaugural cohort For the Culture, and we appreciate you coming on. We do want to remind our guests, thank you so much for coming, dropping your comments, being present on this live with us, that we are absolutely committed to bringing to you again, to please email your topics so that we can make sure that we share them at hoseychapelmedia@gmail.com, because this is your voice and your opportunity to share. And the more we do this, we know the more y'all will get comfortable with us and the more you'll talk to us. And so that's what we want to see. So we thank you all for joining us this evening. We do want to let you know that Hosey Chapel C.M.E. Church is celebrating Black History 365. However, this month we are particularly highlighting some fun things. So this upcoming Sunday, the 18th, we are going to have our Black Artist and Designer Spotlight. Got a little fashion show for you. Come through. You can catch us on Facebook, or you can come right on in to the Mighty Church on 8th Street. We'd love to have you. Sunday, February the 25th, we're going to have Youth in the Arts. And we're going to be supporting our young people and all their talents as they walk us through this artistic journey. All right. That concludes the show for this evening. We got a few closing credits for you, and we look to see you next month for the culture. I'm your moderator, Dr. Dolores Tarver. Everybody, much love and good night.
Good night.